Episode 2 of Loki really ramped things up a lot faster than most of us were expecting, with an explosive ending that left us wanting more. Let's take a look at the episode and see what clues they left us, what may be coming next, and who or what exactly this Loki variant may be. I'm Pat with the MontyVerse, and this is Loki Episode 2, The Variant. The episode begins at a Renaissance fair in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1985, which is the birthplace of legendary Marvel Comics continuity expert Mark Gruenwald. The character of Mobius and Mobius in the comics, and to an extent in the series, is based off of the appearance of Gruenwald. A team of Minutemen arrive led by Hunter C-20, played by Sasha Lane, who you may or may not recognize from the Hellboy reboot. My money is on not. They trace the Nexus energy to a tent with a sign in front that says Miniature Pony, that also happens to be green and gold, the colors of Loki. When they enter, the speakers play the announcement from outside that a joust is about to start, and the prize is a princess. Will evil prevail, or are we holding out for a hero? And just then, it cues the song, I Need a Hero. We can already see that this variant has a flair for the theatrics with choosing a green and gold tent and the choice of song. Are they a hero who claims their princess, aka C-20, to stop evil from prevailing, evil being the TVA? The variant sends her consciousness into C-20, which looks almost identical to how Wanda gave the Avengers illusions in Age of Ultron, with the magic hitting the temple and the eyes changing color. C-20 takes down her team working with the variant. She then faints while the variant finishes off the last Minutemen, stealing another reset charge and a temp pad in the process, while taking the unconscious Hunter C-20 hostage. We then catch up with Loki, who is at Mobius' desk looking at a jet ski magazine and being schooled on the TVA by Miss Minutes. Now, Miss Minutes is weird. Loki asks if she is sentient or recording, and she appears to react to him attempting to hit her in real time, so she has to be alive. We also see on the TVA temp pads that there is a Miss Minutes option, so how powerful is Miss Minutes, and what is she exactly? Mobius comes to get Loki, explaining there has been another attack, and during the briefing with Hunter B-15 and the Minutemen, Mobius notes that they are looking for not just any variant, but a Loki. He says the TVA has pruned a lot of these guys, almost more than any other variant, and we are shown a bunch of them. We have a blue Loki, who is Loki in his natural Jotun appearance, being born blue and a miniature frost giant, a Loki who wins the Tour de France, a Hulk goblin-looking Loki, a bearded Loki with baggy clothes and a Vote Loki button on, and a traditional Viking Loki. Mobius says that no two are alike and that their powers vary, with all of them seeming to have shape-shifting, illusion projection, and Loki jumps in saying that illusion projection and duplication casting are two separate powers. The team arrives in 1985, and Loki asks why they don't arrive before the attack, and Mobius informs him and the audience that Nexus events destabilize the timeline. The branch is growing and changing in real time, so you have to show up in real time. At the crime scene, Loki attempts to stall the TVA, saying he sees a scheme, and in that scheme he sees himself. He tells them of an old Asgardian saying, where there are wolf's ears, wolf's teeth are near, and claims to know what the variant is doing, and must speak with the timekeepers at once to warn them. But Mobius sees through this deception because he is smart and he has ears too. He knows that Loki's goal is to meet with the timekeepers. He has the Minutemen set the reset charge before they leave, and we actually see what it does this episode, and it's pretty gnarly. It disintegrates all persons and things in its path, effectively pruning the branch, which is pretty dark if you think about it. I mean, how many different versions of people have just been disintegrated by the TVA without us realizing it? In Renslayer's office, we see 3 statues of the Timekeepers, and it appears that Renslayer has somewhat of a connection to the 3 beings, if they still exist. She also has memorabilia from all of Mobius' cases, but he notices that she has a new one, a snow globe that we later see reads San Diego. He questions where it came from, and she tells him he is not the only analyst working for her. She hands Mobius a drink while discussing the botched mission and yells at him for not using a coaster, saying the rings on the table that are there were caused by him, but he doesn't seem to recall this, and says that it may be her mystery analyst. Is it possible the TVA has variants of Mobius like in the comics, and they're still active or maybe even being reset? We find out that Renslayer apparently is in close communication with the Timekeepers, as she tells Mobius they are very interested in this case and are more involved than they ever have been before. We also learn that Mobius has never met the Timekeepers, adding on to the mystique of these beings. She signs the case report R Slayer, which is definitely an interesting choice, and not making her look any less suspicious. And Mobius signs his initials, which are MMM, because in the comics, and apparently in the MCU, his name is Mobius M. Mobius. As she hands a report to Mobius to sign, he notices the pen is from Franklin D. Roosevelt High School, and he says he doesn't remember giving it to her. We're left to really wonder who this mystery analyst is. Franklin D. Roosevelt High School is a real school in Brooklyn, New York. Could Steve Rogers have worked missions for the TVA? That doesn't really explain the snow globe from San Diego, though. Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, is another character in Marvel Comics who went to high school in Brooklyn, which may be a stretch, but he does have ties to cosmic beings, more specifically the Beyonder. And the Beyonder does have ties to all these Secret Wars events. A frustrated Mobius sits Loki at the desk in the library and wants him to review every file pertaining to the Loki variant. While Loki is there, he attempts to ask the librarian for access to all files pertaining to the creation of the TVA, the beginning of time and the end of time. But the librarian tells him that all those files are classified, which really makes you wonder why everything about the Timekeepers and the beginning of the TVA is such a big secret. This whole episode reminds me a lot of the film Seven, but these library scenes in particular seem to be an homage to the library scene in that movie. Loki comes across the file for Ragnarok, and he is visibly upset reading about the destruction of his home and essentially the extinction of the Asgardian race, minus the small amount of refugees that survived Ragnarok and the opening of Infinity War. A fun note here is that we see the name The Revengers, which means the name is actually what Thor's team is referred to in the canon of the MCU and the TVA. The file also gets Loki thinking, though. In the cafeteria, he explains to Mobius that the variant is hiding in apocalypses, because nothing you do in them has any effect on the timeline, because everything is supposed to be destroyed in the event anyway. Loki ruins Mobius's plain salad lunch by demonstrating this with a poor analogy, using salt, pepper, and a Boku fruit juice that he takes from Casey. The Boku juice continues the Josta soda trend from last episode of the TVA having access to beverages from throughout time that are no longer available to us. Loki convinces Mobius to take him to an apocalypse to test his theory by saying he can trust one thing: Loki always likes to be right. So they go to Pompeii, Italy at 79 AD right before its destruction courtesy of Mount Vesuvius. Mobius tells Loki to try small disturbances at first in case Loki is wrong, so they don't create a huge branch. Loki, being Loki, does not listen and runs into a crowd of people declaring he's from the future and they are about to die. And zero variance energy is detected, so this proves that Loki was indeed right. Loki and Mobius head back to the TVA to narrow down the events that the variant could be hiding in. They take a break in the cafeteria and compare how crazy both of their beliefs are: the Timekeepers and the TVA and Norse mythology. This is actually a great moment for Mobius as we get to learn a lot about the character. Owen Wilson has been excellent in the role, and he really does a great job in this episode of showing more sides to Mobius. Someone who yearns for more and who has a deep love for jet skis of all things, even though he's never been on one, because they remind him of what he's fighting for. We also see that Mobius is just a hard worker and a believer in the TVA, but he also cares. He tells us here that the TVA protects what came before, while the Timekeepers are apparently untangling the epilogue from its infinite branches. When they are done, so is the TVA, and they all meet in the end of time, in perfect order. Loki informs Mobius that no one bad is ever truly bad, and no one is ever truly good. This further expands on the potential that the Timekeepers are somewhat nefarious in their intentions or approach, or maybe something else is going on entirely. But, more importantly, this gives Mobius an idea. They head back to the archives and Mobius takes the kablooey gum from last episode and says they now have something to cross-reference it with. Loki also reveals that there is no candy on Asgard, but there are grapes and nuts. That's real fun. They cross-reference the years kablooey gum was sold with apocalyptic events which reveal that the Earth is pretty much screwed in a couple of decades. They rule out the climate disaster of 2048, the tsunami of 2051, the 2050 extinction of the Swallow, with Krakatoa also erupting again in 2049. Loki finally lands on 2050 Haven Hills, Alabama, where a Category 8 hurricane destroys the entire town with over 10,000 casualties. And yes, you did hear me right, I did say Category 8, because apparently in this future, hurricanes have become so severe that we had to adjust our strength rating system. After the mission is approved, Loki and Mobius suit up with the rest of the Minutemen, and Mobius gives Loki his daggers just in case, which B-15 immediately takes and throws in her locker. We see a sign of the happy beachfront town of Haven Hills that have these large structures producing tons of air pollution in the back. The sign is then destroyed, revealing the current appearance of Haven Hills, which is disaster. The location our team is headed is the Rocksmart Superstore, which is a nod to the Roxxon Corporation, a big company that appears in both the comics and the MCU. Apparently in the future they expanded and get involved in producing these vast superstores. The squad enters the store and Loki uses his magic to dry himself, which startles and bothers B-15. We learn that the people are hauled up in the warehouse to take shelter from the storm, and when Loki and Mobius attempt to split up, B-15 takes Loki with her and sends Mobius with the rest of the Minutemen. Loki and B-15 come across a man who is shopping for plants because of a hurricane sale. But this man is revealed to be controlled by the Variant, who transfers their consciousness into B-15. We get a nice moment where the Variant-controlled B-15 does the classic Loki head tilt. We see Mobius chastise the Minuteman because they don't really have any care or concern for people, especially ones who they say are going to die anyway. Mobius is called over because one of the team found Hunter C-20, and she's repeating the phrase, "It is real," and admits she revealed how to get to the Timekeepers. Loki calls the consciousness transfer that the Variant is doing enchanting, and the Variant jumps into a Roxcart worker named Randy. Loki attempts to form a partnership with this Variant, revealing that is why he tried to find them. Loki wants to join forces to overthrow the Timekeepers, but the Variant is not about it. The Variant also reveals that they do not like to be called Loki. B-15 wakes up, and when she does, she also appears to be shaken and haunted by what she saw. Now, what exactly is it that B-15 and C-20 saw? Is it possible that the real thing that C-20 is talking about is the multiverse? That it was real and it is supposed to exist, and that their entire purpose and the TVA were created in a lie? With the Timekeepers or whoever is behind the scenes just building a sacred timeline of events that they choose. The Variant is stalling. This time she shifts consciousness into a big brute who tosses Loki around. Loki asks what this is all about, and we get our big reveal finally. The Variant is Lady Loki, portrayed by Sophia DiMartino. She says this isn't about Loki, and her plan is finally revealed, as a bunch of reset charges begin to go off and are sent to specific places and points on the timeline. She essentially bombed the sacred timeline, and this causes mass hysteria at the TVA as they begin to scramble because massive branches are appearing all over the timeline. We see a list of the places hit, including Vormir, the home of the Soul Stone, Asgard, 4 years before the first Thor movie, Sakaar, the junk planet from Thor Ragnarok, Ego, the living planet, aka Star-Lord's dad, Titan, the homeworld of Thanos, Hala, the sacred homeworld of the Kree, Xandar, home planet of the Nova Corps, Jotunheim, the home of the Frost Giants, and Loki's true people, as well as a bunch of other cities across the Earth. All attacks happening at different points in time. Swarms and swarms of TVA Minutemen begin jumping through time doors in an attempt to control the chaos, and Renslayer grabs her baton knowing that something or someone, probably Lady Loki, is coming her way. Speaking of which, we see Lady Loki open a time door and walk through it as Loki begins to follow her, before Mobius calls out to him in an attempt to stop him. Loki ultimately walks through the door, and the episode ends with a frustrated Mobius. Another interesting thing to note is that we do see some variations in the credits this episode. Some minor changes, like the pictures of Loki that are used in the credits, as well as the posters. Now, this could be a sign that time is changing and the universe as we know it is shifting in ways. So essentially what they're trying to say is that Lady Loki may have created the multiverse. And a fun thing I noticed was that the date this episode aired is 6/16. And as we know by now, 6/16 is the number designation of the Marvel Comics universe in the Marvel Multiverse. But is this Lady Loki? We know that she does not like to be called Loki, but her appearance, more specifically her horns, are very reminiscent of Loki as he appears in Loki, Agent of Asgard. More specifically, the later issues of that series, when he only has one good horn and one broken one, and more specifically than that, when he goes by the Goddess of Stories moniker. However, in the different language credits, it is revealed that her name is Sylvie. In the comics, there is a character called Sylvie Lushton, who was created by Loki and given the same powers as Amara the Enchantress, which makes her model her look after Amara, becoming the second Enchantress in Marvel Comics. Is this who Sophia DiMartino is actually playing? Well, not exactly, because if we pay really close attention to this episode, we see that one of the papers that Loki is looking at has the name Sylvie Laufeydotter written on it. It was common among the Vikings to have a surname after your father. For example, Thor is the son of Odin, and he is Thor Odinson. Loki is Loki Laufeyson, because he is the son of Laufey. So it appears that Sylvie may be a Loki variant who was born female and chose to go by the name Sylvie instead of Loki. This is actually a smart move because it allows them to save the Enchantress moniker for Amara while using aspects of the character of Sylvie Lushton. It also makes it easier to have dialogue between her and Loki without them referring to each other as Loki or Loki and Lady Loki. I do think this character is going to be a combination of both Sophie Lushton as well as Loki in her Goddess of Stories form. Someone who is sick of playing the part everyone wants them to play and decides to flip the script and tell their own story. Which leaves the question, what is her goal, and is she working alone? We know Richard E. Grant is in this series, but we do not know who exactly he's playing. The obvious answer would be King Loki, the super evil older Loki who could be working with or controlling Sylvie. But what if he's playing someone else? What if Marvel has bigger plans for him and he's playing the Beyonder, who is essentially a highly powerful cosmic being who could be the one pulling the strings behind all of this? The sacred timeline would be something he would be into because he desires for everything to be complete because he feels he himself is complete, and the only version of himself in the multiverse. It would be a very interesting character for the MCU to introduce, especially because he was the one who instigates or is involved in all variations of the Secret War/Wars event in Marvel Comics. Whatever the case may be, I know that Loki is not holding back on surprises, and I am so excited to see what the next episode holds. As always, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, and if you like the content, give us a huge like, and comment below your thoughts on the episode and what you think might be happening next. Until next time, guys, I'll catch you later.